Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So, today we are going to talk about South Korea and the United States and lending and Ukraine and a statement from a certain U.S. representative. We will go through the statement and then we will fact check the statement because, of course. Then we will talk about what's actually happening and why it's happening. Then we'll talk about what the real news story here is, assuming this is true, and then we'll introduce a new rule that I think everybody should live by. Okay, so the statement is from Representative Green, and here it is. This is unforgivable that we have given so much, all caps, ammunition to Ukraine that we have to borrow, all caps, 50,000 rounds from South Korea. Pathetic, all caps, 3 exclamation points. The entire Biden admin is a failure, all caps. Okay, so we'll start with the fact check, because while caps lock is cruise control for cool, you still have to drive, and she didn't. All right, so the first thing to note is that this is not a deal. What's being discussed, it's not a deal. It's not finalized. It's in negotiations. And as somebody who is part of the federal government, she probably shouldn't be acting as though it is finalized and commenting on it in public, since it's not. In a recent video, I talked about how you might have newly minted people in Congress talking about foreign policy and causing issues. It would look something like this if that was to happen. The next piece to be fact-checked, it's not 50,000 rounds. It's 500,000 rounds. And then we get to the word borrow. Okay. So she's talking about the possible deal between the U.S. and South Korea, where South Korea is going to loan 500,000 rounds of 155 millimeter howitzer ammunition. Okay. Loan is, that's definitely in quotation marks. Generally speaking, when you're talking about howitzer ammo, you don't get it back when you loan it to somebody. It is really hard to go out there and pick up all the pieces and super glue it back together. It takes a lot of time. It's easier just to build new ones. The fact that the word loan was used, to anybody who has an understanding of foreign policy would realize there's something else going on. It's not the U.S. borrowing ammo. So what is actually happening? First thing you need to know, 155 millimeter howitzer ammo, it is being used a lot over there. For those who are wondering, is this the same ammo that we were talking about 7 months ago? Yes, same stuff. It's being used a lot in Ukraine, a whole lot, for a couple of reasons. One is doctrinal, that they use it more than most countries would. And part of that is because there's not a lot of air support. Since there's not a lot of air support, they have to use artillery to fill that role. So they're burning through a lot of this ammo, this particular type. Okay, so South Korea is a country that does not provide lethal aid. Generally speaking, they don't do that. They'll provide tons of humanitarian aid, but they do not provide lethal aid. It's extremely rare. So, remember at the beginning of the conflict, when it all started in Ukraine, you had a lot of countries that didn't want to commit lethal aid, and so what they would do is they would send Poland 50 lethal widgets, and then Poland would give Ukraine 50 lethal widgets of their own manufacture. They would just kind of swap them out. If this is occurring, that's what's happening. South Korea, at that international poker game where everybody's cheating, South Korea is sliding the U.S. a card. The United States is then going to slide a different card, made in the USA, to Ukraine. That way, South Korean ammo never enters the battlefield. That way, they didn't provide lethal aid because it's a principle that they don't want to violate. That's what's happening. It's not because of, a massive shortfall. In fact, if somebody was, I don't know, in Congress, they might know that the United States is currently ramping up production of 155, I want to say 600%. And it's supposed to be double by the end of the month, where they're going to be pumping out almost 1,000 of these things a day. It's not correctly framed by this representative. Shock, I know, right? So, it isn't a situation where the U.S. is begging South Korea to loan them ammo for their own uses. It's a situation where the U.S. is trying to get all of its allies to provide aid to Ukraine, and South Korea doesn't provide lethal aid. So this way, they get a workaround. That's what's going on. What's the real story here? A country that is notorious for not providing lethal aid is, in theory, maybe, and maybe still, looking for ways to work around that long-standing principle because the situation in Ukraine is that important. That's the actual story. Now, new rule, something I've said repeatedly over the last couple of weeks, is don't get your news from Facebook memes. Don't get your foreign policy stories from the space laser lady. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.